Welcome everyone to our weekly Torah learning of spreading more light. We always like to start off with giving because how we give, that's how Hashem's going to give to us. Let's give generously so Hashem will give us generously. We're going to put some coins in the tzedakah box. Please join me from home. Tzedakah is also protection. We're going to start off with saying Tehillim. The Tzemach Tzedek said if you only knew the power of Tehillim, you would say it day and night. So we are going to say Kapitel Chaf, Psalm 20 for the release of all the hostages immediately, for protection for all the IDF, the Chayalim and Chayalot. Hashem should protect their holy mission, and for the protection of all the Jewish people around the whole world and in Eretz Yisrael. And of course, Mashiach should come. So we're going to say Psalm 20, Kapitel Chaf now. Lam natseach mizmar leDavid yancha Adonai b'yam Sarah. Yisagevcha Shem Elohei HaKav yishlach hazorcha mikodesh. Umitzion yisadeka yiskar kol min chaysecha be'lascha yidash nesela. Yitain lacha chelva v'efcha v'chlat ascha yimalei. Niranena b'shuasecha v'shem Eloheinu nidgal yimalei Adonai kol mishal yisecha. Ata yidaiti ki yashia Adonai mishichai. Yanehu mishmei kachai b'gvorei seisha yiminai. Ela v'recha v'ela v'susim v'anachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu naskir. Hema karu v'nafalu v'anachnu kamnu v'nesaydad. Adonai Yeshia, Hamelech Yaninu V'yam Karinu. We're going to say a couple of names for Tehillim that we dedicate this class to, and for everyone that needs. Refuah Shalema for Chani and Rivka Bashindal, Yosef ben Dvoralea, Yosef Yitzchak ben Bela, Razel Basadas, Rafal Chaimer ben Simachasha, Yosef Shlomo ben Risha, Dvoralea Bas Yafa Liba, Gershon Leib ben Menucha, and Meir Simcha ben Rifkadina, and everybody that needs, we are including you in this list. I also do these classes weekly in memory of my dear grandmother, Rifkadina Bas Yosef Yehuda, I hope you're proud. My other grandmother, Bela Bas Betzalel, I hope you're proud. My great uncle, Chaim Dov ben Betzalo, known as Chaim Ber Wilshansky. To save a life is saving a world, and he saved many in the Soviet Union. Sanya Zahara Bas David, she perished in a terrible fire this year, and Hashem should comfort her family, a dear friend of mine, sister and sister-in-law. And Rabbi Shalom Lipsker, Shalom Dober ben Eliyahu Akiva. Not every gem is a giant, and not every giant is a gem, but Rabbi Lipsker was both a giant and a gem, and may we be reunited with the coming of Mashiach. Today we have with us someone really special in honor of Chayelo. I asked a very special person in our community of Crown Heights, Rabbi Michoel Seligson, to share with us about his dear father, Dr. Seligson. Rabbi Seligson is a Magen Shir in Oli Torah. He's also a teacher in Beis Rivka, and he also puts out Hasidus for the whole world on different podcasts and different programs. He wrote many Sfarim, I believe 30 or more, and we will link all of his Hasidus classes after this class. Welcome, welcome, Rabbi Michoel Seligson. The reason why this week we asked Rabbi Seligson to speak is because he is a descendant of the Alter Rebbe, and Chai Elul is the birthday of the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. And I thought it was appropriate to share a little bit about his family background and his father, who was so loved by the community, and he was a doctor, a big doctor, and he was also the Rebbe's doctor, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's doctor. Welcome, Rabbi Seligson. We're honored to have you tune in with us today, and I'm excited for this beautiful talk.
Thank you very much for having me, and Hatzlacha Rabbi.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your father and what you know about his background.
Okay, I'm going to elaborate somewhat on my father. My father was born in Poland, but his father comes from Russia. And since the Shidduch, his soulmate he met in Krakow, and therefore this is where they got married. And my father was born in Krakow, 1907. There were many physicians in the family. Some were medical physicians, some were psychiatry, and therefore he also had an inclination to help people. My father, and he went on to study medicine, and this was in Vilna. At that time, it wasn't easy for a Jewish person to be registered in a university in Vilna. There were other considerations they had, And eventually, once he started to empty, he was taken in. He studied medicine and he graduated very in flying colors. He actually became a professor in medicine. He had a doctorate, and he wrote different theses, different writings, articles based on experiments, based on research that he did. And he was in touch with Professor Howard Cushing, who was in the Yale University then, one of the top neurosurgeons in the world at that time. And there was correspondence going on between them, between Poland and the United States. And eventually came the war, and Sugihara, who was known as the Japanese consul. He's the one that gave visas. My father received a visa from him and wandered through Russia, and then eventually came to Kobe, Japan. And after that, they were in Shanghai for about 5 years, 6 years through the war. And then finally, in 1947, my father arrived in the United States through California. He had to receive a license for the United States. He needed to take over all the tests. Eventually, he took over all the tests and was very successful. He notified the previous Rebbe, and the previous Rebbe sent him a bracha. This was late 1949, that he should be successful in medicine. And that's when his career began in Crown Heights.
Okay, so when did he become the Lubavitcher Rebbe's doctor?
When he arrived in the United States in 1947, there was a physician attending to the previous Rebbe, and my father was taken in as a junior physician. He would monitor the previous Rebbe. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, would many times take him to see the Frierdiker Rebbe, and that's how there was already a connection then, which actually a Chassidish connection between them already began with the previous Rebbe in 1936. My father met the Frierdiker Rebbe in Vienna, in Wien, and he had a yechidus then. And then he became, in the late 40s,
So I
a
just want to
attending
interrupt for 1
physician.
minute. I just want to interrupt you for one moment. A yechidus is a private audience with the
A
previous Rebbe.
yechidus is a private audience between a chassid and a rebbe, and basically it was an interesting insight that the previous rebbe mentioned then to him in this yechidus, in this private audience, and in later years he became a junior attending physician, and in fact, that Yud Shvat morning, Shabbos morning, Tavshin Yud 1950, when the Frierdiker Rebbe did not feel well, my father was called in then on that emergency, and he was there then at the Istalkos at the passing of the previous Rebbe.
Okay, so question for you. When your father had Dr. Seligson, your dad, had a private audience with the previous Rebbe, his first private audience, is it documented what went on in that private audience?
Yes, my father told me what it was, and he told it to me exactly the way he heard it from the previous Rebbe. This is decades later. Um, the Frierdiker Rebbe asked my father, what is he learning? What is he studying? My father says he learns Nigla and Chassidus. He learns the revealed part of Torah, the Talmud, Halacha, Jewish law, and he also studies Chassidus, which is the inner part of Torah. And the previous Rebbe then said there's a certain quote from the sages in the Talmud, in the tractate of Shabbos, that when a person eats something and he doesn't drink, the food is considered like blood. It wasn't digested because there was no liquid to circulate and help the food be digested. And the previous Rebbe interpreted it. Eating means the revealed part of Torah. Chassidus is the concealed part of Torah. When a person eats, he learns Nigla, but he doesn't learn Chassidus, the Torah does not become digested. It doesn't become internalized in the person. And therefore, there's a need also to learn Chassidus. And the previous Rebbe continued, you are a physician, and when a physician prescribes a medication, there is also a need to take a drink with it in order that it should be internalized in the body. And this was basically the yechidus that my father had then. I later found in it the thought about eating and drinking. I found it in a discourse of the previous Rebbe in 1926 or late 25. And I showed it to my father. This was like exactly what he heard from the previous Rebbe privately in that Yechidas private audience.
And do you think he told your father this exact, like this private audience with your father because he knew exactly where your father comes from, that he's a descendant of the Alter Rebbe?
I'm sure because there was a connection between the previous Rebbe and my grandfather, who was the only Lubavitcher Chassid in Krakow. And the previous Rebbe was once there in 1907, 1908, and he stayed in the house where my grandparents lived. And in 1933, my my grandfather got a letter from the previous Rebbe to establish a Chassidus shir in his house. So he was the only Lubavitcher, and it was Shabbos morning. Uh, Chassidim would come from other circles, Belzer, Gerer Chassidim. And at a certain point, Rabbi Mentlik, who later became the Rosh Yeshiva in 770, he was the Bacher who came from Otvotsk for Shabbos to Krakow. And this was a shir that was going on for quite a while. It's also documented by Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson that my grandfather at the time gave the shir. So basically, there was a connection between the previous Rebbe and my grandfather, and obviously geared to my father because he knew who he was.
Wow. So in when he set up like a shir on Shabbos by him, um, did people change after they started learning Hasidus? Is there any documentations how it?
It's a good question because basically the aim of this year was also to be mekarev certain yeshiva bacharim, Chassidus Chabad, and Rabbi Mentlik would speak with them and learning. Rabbi Mentlik was a very young bacher then, 18, 19 years old. And my father said they would test him. They would really see what he knows. And they were very impressed with his knowledge and with his sharpness. And it really made a Kiddush Shem Lubavitch. I'm sure that some of them were Niskarev. I did not hear names, but I know on other occasions there were many Pelisha Bachim from Pelisha Yeshivas that became Lubavitch, and later they became Rosh Yeshivas here in New York and in Montreal, etc.
So would you say that Hasidus, because you said that the previous Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, wanted them to learn Hasidus, would you say that if you're not Chabad, is Hasidus for everyone? And if you could expand on that, like, do you have to be Lubavitch to learn Hasidus?
Okay, the Rebbe quoted many times from the Alter Rebbe, founder of Chabad, Shnei Zalman of Liadi, that Chassidus is not just for Chassidim, it's not only for Chabad, it's for all Yidden. It is a part of Torah that was given over to us, and it opens up the eyes of a person. It is an eye opener. It also brings in a special energy, a chayas, a liveliness in fulfilling Torah mitzvahs. It carries the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs on a higher standard.
Wow. And what would you suggest for people to start with when they don't have Hasidus in their life? Like, where do they start?
Okay, there were a few letters from the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe suggesting what a person should begin with when they are just being introduced to Chassidus. There is a Hemshach, a series of discourses called Kuntras Umayon, which was written by the Rebbe Rashab, and the topics are of such that anybody could relate to it because it quotes many quotes from our sages in the Talmud, in the Medrash and anthology, and therefore a person could feel very comfortable with that. And then there's Derech Mitzvah Secha, which is also a sefer of the Tzemach Tzedek HaMitzvahs. The Rebbe also suggested Tanya, especially the second section of Tanya, the second part, which is called Shara Yichud Vamuna. And then there's deeper and deeper. But this was basically the introduction.
Okay, now tell us a little bit about your father. He's a descendant of the Alter Rebbe. Um, how did that play out for his life? And as a physician, if you could tell some stories, how he influenced people with his by being a doctor. Because he wasn't just a doctor, he was also a chassid of the Rebbe and the previous Rebbe.
The my father's approach was very private with people, very careful, respecting people, the dignity of every individual person, as a doctor, as a person, a special person of his caliber. And people watched him, how he davened, people watched him, how he treated people, how he spoke with people. And this is basically where respect was gained. He gained respect by people seeing him as a role model. Davening, he would daven for hours. He would do speaking with people. He would speak with each one according to their level. Didn't speak down to them. Didn't express any anger or anything. He was very mild, pleasant. With children, he would relate to them in their language. It was interesting to see how he knew exactly what to say to who. And then, of course, there were also scholars, Talmidei Chachamim, who came, especially the group who he learned with. He actually didn't learn in Shanghai. He was already after the yeshiva years, but he stayed there with them. He spent with them 5 6 years, so they were like his buddies. So even in the later years when they came to him, it was like a special tension, a special focus, special conversations going on. And in addition, Talmidei Chachamim, scholars from the neighborhood, from Crown Heights, even from other neighborhoods who knew him from Shanghai, they would come to him. The older generation from Williamsburg, from Borough Park, they would come to him, or he would pay visits to them. He would do doctor visits.
And when
And
he was in
they
Shanghai,
really trusted him.
when
Mhm.
he was in Shanghai, do we know more about that? Like what he did there? It was almost like a stopover.
In Shanghai, in general, my father, because of his modesty, a great extent, unusual extent, did not want anything should be written up about him in Shanghai. He just wrote his autobiography up to Shanghai, but nothing what he accomplished in Shanghai. But he actually saved many Yidden in Shanghai. There were many epidemics there. There was cholera, there was malaria, there was typhus, there was about five or more illnesses. You couldn't drink water without cooking it. I found a prescription my father wrote stating, or actually a statement that he made, how a child of 9 months needed to be inoculated against all these illnesses. It was miracles that people survived. He was very involved in researching this problem and how they can be helped. They were very limited in what they can do because there wasn't much food there, and therefore there were supplements to be taken, vitamins. He would deliver vitamins to people who would walk for miles to deliver a vitamin to a child every morning, every few days, going on for quite a while. That's how he saved lives. He saved lives with being in discussion also with other doctors to find out what's the best thing, because there were many diseases that they had, and some of them I don't even want to mention how agonizing they were. And it was that he looked after them, took care of them. There were lines of people waiting for him to see them, and eventually, Baruch Hashem, his patients supplements that they needed to use because they didn't have liver, so they needed to use peanuts. So they ate so many peanuts that the next 40 years they couldn't look at it. It was but this was basically what kept them on their feet. Eventually, they came to the United States or to Canada. They built up families, children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. There was a story with a lady that one of the doctors there wanted to do surgery, and this would, chas v'sholem, bring about that she wouldn't have any children. Okay, this is a lady. who lived in Shanghai. So there was a certain lady who had an issue having children, and the doctors over there said she should she shouldn't expect any children, and she shouldn't even try to have children. My father told her, "Wait till you get to the United States. You will have children and grandchildren with Hulu." She came to my father told her that she should not make that procedure because when she'll come to America, there'll be other doctors and they could help her. And they wish to help that she raised a whole family, can honor many children in the United States. And this was thanks to my father, who just talked her off not to listen to the procedure or to the doctors who was trying to convince us otherwise.
So can
Um,
I just ask you a question on the story? What did which procedure did the doctors want to do?
it's basically to remove her ability of having children.
Because they felt like she couldn't have any children.
Yeah, so they felt that this could be dangerous for her. So, in a very wrongful way, they're trying to convince her that. And my father says do not follow it. So, actually, he was also a Refa Yedid, which was one of the major things. A doctor, a friend. He was very devoted to every person, like his own family. He would call up sometimes after a person was by him for a visit, and he felt he had a better idea. He would call up an hour or two later saying, "I have a better idea which could be more beneficial, smoother, and could be very helpful." And that's the way he worked. He was just constantly thinking about his patients, very devoted to them day and night. In his time, there was no Hatzola. Hatzola did not start till the ambulance Crown Heights was 1977. So till then, he was everything. Every emergency went through the house. Some of them he directed to the hospital, some of them he treated on his own. And he was known as the Reif in Crown Heights of Anash, Lubavitch Chassidim, and also others who lived, many lived in Crown Heights. Crown Heights was, Baruch Hashem, a very big schuna of many communities, Stiblach, and they would swear by him. There was a story once with a lady who was expecting, but it was a little early, and which means a certain accident that happened, and she needed to go to the hospital immediately. Her life was in danger. And there were no ambulances then besides the city ambulance. And my father saw that this guy was very slow about it, this ambulance driver. My father immediately started to scream at him, which wasn't his nature, to scream at him, immediately take her to the hospital. And he took her to the hospital and they saved her. And my father later got a letter from her father that your mama saved a lady with a whole family of children. Just he knew exactly what it was, and he saved this lady and the family. And in fact, my father generally knew everything about whatever there is in the medical field. He wasn't just a stomach doctor, throat, cardiologist. He didn't practice all these professions. In his modesty, he just practiced a few of these fields, but in general, he knew and he had an understanding about all other things. In fact, there was once a story of Rabbi Groner told me that it was once his
I just
mother.
wanted to, for those listening that don't know who Rabbi Groner is, just tell us who Rabbi Groner is.
Okay, Rabbi Groner was one of the Rebbe's secretaries, and when he came to be Menachem Avalos to console us after my father's tira, passing, he mentioned there was a story with his mother who had a issue with the lungs, and the lung uh, doctor told her that this is a very serious issue. And then she came to my father, and my father told her there's nothing wrong. There's nothing really serious about it. And she was going back and forth. And eventually, my father spoke with this professor in this field, and he said to the patient's son, Rabbi Groner, that Dr. Seligson, without his instruments that I have, knows more than I have with the instruments. So he was explaining to the lung professor what exactly was taking place. These are stories that happened. People went to doctors in Manhattan, and they later came to my father, and my father gave him a very simple remedy which worked, and they didn't have to come back again. My father wasn't a person that said come back again and again like other doctors have this nature. There was a lady that came from France. She had a skin irritation. The doctors over there couldn't do anything. Came to my father. My father gave her an ointment. He looked through the medical book. He gave her an ointment. She came back. It was all cured. So when she showed it to the doctors there, the doctor said either he's a miracle worker or he knows something that we don't know. And this is what's happening occasionally or more than occasionally, which we heard from the patients from their personal experience.
Tell me something. Sometimes, from what I understand, your father was very humble, so I'm sure he didn't charge as much as the doctors did, regular doctors, regular professionals, cardiologists in the city. So was there ever a story where someone felt like because you get what you pay for, right? So was there ever a story where someone felt like maybe he wasn't, they wanted to go someone more professional?
Yes, there was such a story, which I heard from a good friend of mine. There was a person who came to my father. My father charged very little, talking about the 60s, a few dollars altogether. And he gave him his opinion. And then the doctor said, my father said, there's no problem, etc. And this person decided that he wants to hear from a doctor in Manhattan, takes more money, probably knows more. And he went in to made an appointment with the doctor in Manhattan. After the doctor examined him, he told him, wait in this room here. This was the consultation room. And he says, wait 1 minute, I'll be back. And the doctor goes into another room and he makes a call and he says, Dr. Seligson, what do you think about this situation? And he was shocked. And he later asked, how much does he have to pay? $250. He realized that it's not the money, it's the quality of the doctor. That the doctors in Manhattan would call for their own needs. They would call my father to figure out certain ideas that he had, which they were not able to come up with it. And they knew if he says it, it's 100% authentic. In fact, even in Shanghai, there were doctors in a different part of Shanghai, and when Bocharim would come to them, students would come to them from the yeshiva, the Lubavitch yeshiva, Mira yeshiva, or from yeshiva, also from the Lublina yeshiva, Chachmi Lublin, they would be asked. The first thing would be, were you by Dr. Seligson? If they were by my father, the doctor would say, we have nothing to add to what he says. So basically, this was the Seder that went on. My father, very sharp, brilliant, knew exactly what needs to be done, acted immediately, was an original mind in different things. He did research. He wrote articles in the AMA and the American Medical in a certain famous magazine, which was already in the time of World War II. In fact, he once met a Japanese doctor, and he asked the doctor, without disclosing who he is, what's new in this field? It was indoctrination, which he was already involved in 1933. And the Japanese doctor said, the only thing we know is this and this article, which was my father's article. He didn't know he was talking to my father. So basically, many people, most of the people did not know my father on a personal level. My father was a scholar in Torah. He wrote commentaries on Tanya, on Chumash, on Talmud, make notes for himself. And my father was also in the medical world a giant. In regards to his learning, the Yonim of Torah. The Rebbe once said about him, regarding to Shidduch for him, this was in 1951, that when they asked the Rebbe, what about his learning? The Rebbe says if he would be by them, which means in the Litvische circles, he would be one of the top. He would speak with the Rebbe in learning in the early years. At home, my father did not speak much, nothing. He just asked we should see Advar Torah, and that's how the Suda proceeded. But there was nothing else that we had no idea, because he would never speak with us about it. We would ask him, he would answer, and we saw his learning. But he would share sometimes with other people learning, but by us, it was just the basics.
So was he like a regular father for you? Did he do like,
He was very involved, although he had patients all day and night, up to 12 at night. Then he would sit down and learn for 4 hours. He slept very little, um, but he was very much in chinuch, very zugetrogen, much like every father. I mean, I went to camp. I was 6.5 years old when I went to camp, which was one of the youngest then. My father was very much into that, and many things that my father gave us, like everybody else.
so during his lifetime, did you know what a giant your father was?
We knew he's a Yerushalayim. We knew that he's connected with the Rebbe. We didn't know details. In fact, in the during the week of the Shiva, which he was nifter in Shvat, Tavshim Mem Tes, 1989, during the week we heard more than we heard over 30 years, because people came with their personal experiences. And but he himself didn't talk. My father would go into the Rebbe every Friday night from 1954 after davening, Kabbalah Shabbos. He would go and be by the Rebbe a half hour, an hour. People knew about it. This we heard after he was nifter. And actually that kept on even in the 60s for a shorter time period. But there was things going on, but he never shared. If in later years, when he started to see that I'm interested in different things, when he get to the Rebbe, so he would share things which were not considered private, things that were being published, and things about the Rebbe, a story about the Rebbe. That the Rebbe once stopped him and asked him about something I did in yeshiva, certainly in the learning. The Rebbe walked over to him as in the middle of the week and asked him questions. My father came that evening and gave over regards. So there were. My father was pitching more things that he was hearing from the Rebbe and shared them with me.
Wow, so you found out a lot after his passing. You
Mostly mavsim, miracles, or things like it was like unbelievable. I mean, there were certain things that I did notice, in his lifetime. I mean, there was once I was in the street. We're all waiting for the Rebbe to go home, and I'm waiting also for my father to go home. And all of a sudden, the Rebbe comes out. The Rebbe goes home, and my father follows. And then I walk home with him, and he said that the Rebbe just gave him a letter from someone in a different country overseas, certain illness, and the Rebbe asked him if he can check out what is the status, what is new in the medical field about this issue, because my father would be in touch with the top in every field, and he would also follow the new things that would be released from Switzerland and other places where they would publish new things about the new discoveries, also experiments in the medical field. And he would follow the magazines, he would read them, and he would know exactly what is happening. And he would then come back to the Rebbe and tell the Rebbe what is happening.
So we know that he was the Rebbe's doctor. At the time, was it known that he was the Rebbe's doctor?
Again, so basically, since he was a private person, nobody knew. I can just attest, I can tell you that in the house, there were many times the phone rang, the Rebbitzin was on the line, and she was asking if my father was home. If not, she left a message. It was either my father should see her in the house, or should check out the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was home. So once the Rebbe, my father was already there in the house for the Rebbitzin, the Rebbe was willing already to be checked out. There were times that my father would only hear the Rebbe coughing, and he knew exactly the nature of his cough. He would immediately send a prescription, which the Rebbe would fill. And the Rebbitzin once said where do I find a doctor like Dr. Seligson that he hears my husband coughing behind the wall, he already writes him a prescription. The Rebbe
And
did follow the prescriptions, that filled them.
what was your mother's role in all this? Do you think she was aware how great her husband was?
She knew, she saw it, and she knew, and whatever he shared, we saw and were aware of, and she was the one that the Rebbe wanted she should keep a limitation. He also has a personal life, and to give him a chance to eat, to give him a chance to sleep, because there was no day, no night. The Rebbe once told her, without you, there's no day, there's no night. It could be 24 hours. People just ring the bell. They're here. So there was a need for that. And she actually protected him.
Um, there's an article that was written that I read, you sent to me about the Deher, and you said this was the best article and it was the most accurate with your father's lifespan. And in there, I read an amazing story where the Rebbe shared something with your mother that I think it was a secret, but now that he's gone, we could share that secret if you can tell us about it.
My mother, when she was in Yechidus, there was one time she went into Yechidus with my brother by mitzvah, and the secretary said that she didn't have an appointment. So she told the Rebbe that if the Rebbe wishes, he'll walk out. The Rebbe says, since you're here already, so you can remain. And it was that occasion then in the late 60s that she was telling the Rebbe about my father being uh, used so much, and there's no respect, and he just doesn't have any time to breathe. So the Rebbe said, "Aloshin, was wilt as alamed vovnik," which means one of the 36 tzaddikim. This is the quote that the Rebbe then said, which means basically that he's devoted. He's devoted his life for the public.
So, can you tell us what a Lamed Vavnik is? Because most
Based on what the Talmud says, and it's mentioned probably more in Kabbalah, that a Lamed Vavnik is one that the world stands on 36 tzaddikim in every generation. It's a level of 36 tzaddikim. So basically, an Lamed Vavnik is someone that he may himself be unassumed, not being aware of what his function is, and people around him don't really make anything out of him, don't really feel or figure that he is someone special, because it's very, very modest and unassuming, low key, not a commotion person. And that's basically the trait of a Lamed Vovnik. There are different stories that are told in regards to the Rabbeim, the earlier Rabbeim, by the Michoel Rebbe, I think it was, that he asked once to see a Lamed Vovnik, and he acted so simple and so lower even than simple that sometimes a person could lose patience with the person because you feel, who is he? Who is he? It's like off the street. But this was the Lamed Vovnik, one of the Lamed Vovniks then. Um, but my father was well versed in many different things happening, but never made an issue out of himself. Never wanted people to make any commotion about him. Never to write him up in any newspaper. They were going to write him up in newspaper. He said no. Um, and I think it was after his passing that I think there was an instruction to the Allgemeiner that they should write him up for the Shloshim, and that's when they wrote up my father. By every one of the Rabbeim came out, there was a doctor, his name was Rabbi Avrom. There was a doctor by the Alter Rebbe, he's called Rabbi Avrom Harefa. There was a doctor by the Mitel Rebbe at the same time. Al derech zeh the Rebbe Marash, al derech zeh Benigia, the Friedike Rebbe, and the Rebbe, which was my father, that's his name, Rabbi Avrom Harefa.
Wow. So, was there anything in particular that you learned about your dad from him? And were you surprised?
One of the things that
Sorry to interrupt. Were you surprised that he was a Lamed Vav? Like during his lifetime, did you know about it?
My father was, as far as we knew him then, he was a Yid, a frumer Yid, a Chassidish Yid, learning every day, every night, although he took off time from his sleep, and he wasn't a young person then. And nevertheless, he was very disciplined. And this is basically what he taught us also. Discipline. This was something which was number one on the list, not wasting time. Sometimes I was sitting and just sitting and thinking. He says, "What are you dreaming?" It was always something to accomplish, either in writing or in learning or whatever it was. Even when I wrote an essay or anything, he would always say, like, "Okay, so what's your question, and what are you accomplishing with this essay? What did you solve? What did you discover something new in that?" He was very much into research. They called him a scientist. He actually could have been one of the top in the medical field, but he wanted to treat patients, Pashut, as a human being, and therefore he decided to do his practice instead of doing research somewhere in a laboratory.
Wow. And did he ever travel to treat patients? Because
He did not have a car. So he would usually take a taxi if he needed to, if it was out of the neighborhood. Mostly people come to him. People who knew him would come from Williamsburg, from Borough Park, from Washington Heights, from East Flatbush. They would come to him because they only wanted to go through him. They knew he is the most authentic, and they felt he is a close friend, and that's who they actually preferred to be checked out by. People knew that when he would say, "There's no problem," even serious illnesses, when my father said there's no problem, they trusted it 100%, 1,000%, because as a diagnostician, that ever once said that he's one of the top diagnosticians in fields, and therefore when a person would come to him and he would say it's nothing, it's nothing. When he would say check it out, then there could have been a suspicion. Sometimes in his modesty, he would send someone to a doctor in Manhattan. The doctor in Manhattan had no idea what to tell him, so then he came back to my father, and my father just told him what he should do. But as modesty, he felt that if it's not his field, he would not give an opinion. He would not treat the person if it would be something in heart related or lung related. But he knew everything, and sometimes he would have to give the answer because the other doctor was not able to cater this answer.
and did the Rebbe ever send people to him?
My father was the Rebbe referred many patients to my father. I'll mention a few stories which are basically miracle stories, um, and real serious stories. There are a few stories out there about oranges, etc., but there is a few real serious stories which the families alone mentioned. There's one story with a lady who had a heart condition. It was in 1972 approximately, and she wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe sent it to Rabbi Twersky, who was one who would refer to doctors and the top physicians in every field, and he sent it to cardiologist. Cardiologist said that needs surgery immediately. He does not give more than a half a year if there's no surgery. She didn't want to do surgery. They wrote into the Rebbe. The Rebbe sent it to my father. When he came to my father asked, did he say my name or he said, Erefa, you did a doctor, a friend? So they answered, he said your name. So my father said right there and then, there's no need for surgery. They got very scared because they heard the severity of the situation as it was evaluated by this cardiologist. So they asked if my father could speak with this cardiologist. He wasn't really interested. And eventually got on. After 10 minutes, he went off and he said in Yiddish, and I'll translate it. First, he said, uh, halt seins and ich halt meins. He holds his and I hold mine. There's no need for surgery. They wrote into the Rebbe. The Rebbe gave a bracha. and she lived another 18 years, from a half a year to 18 years. An additional story was with a shliach, Rabbi Berel Baumgarten, who was a famous shliach, the head shliach in Argentina. And in the late 60s, he was diagnosed with a serious illness. He came to Manhattan, the hospital there, to make the tests. And he took his whole folder, his whole medical records, and he brought it all to the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, "Was kommst du zu mir? What are you coming to me? You're going to Dr. Seligson." Came to my father. My father knew he came from the Rebbe, and he knew what the Rebbe wanted. And my father said, "Show me the x-rays." He takes out the x-rays, and my father says, "Show me where." And he's showing here. My father says, "I don't see anything." And again, he shows him specifically. My father says, "I don't see anything." Rabbi Baumgarten had no idea what was going on here. So he thought, you know what? Let me go back to the Rebbe. He went back to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked him, what did he say? So he said, the doctor sagt zet gar nicht. Dr. Seligson sagt zet gar nicht. Dr. Seligson says he doesn't see anything. The Rebbe says, let me give a look. Show me where. And the Rebbe says, und ich sehe echt gar nicht. I also don't see anything. And basically, the person was cured. This was the disease, as they say. A third story, which happened Simchas Torah in 770, that was a story that happened with a Bocher who passed out during an intermission between a Farbrengen and Hakofes. 770 was like upside down then. For those of us who remember then, it was the break, and there was a lot going on. The shul was being converted from a mode of a Farbrengen to a mode of Hakofes, and miracles were happening. This child passed out. They couldn't revive him at the time, and his father immediately went to Rabbi Chodikov and told Rabbi Chodikov this is an emergency and he needs to go into the Rebbe. Rabbi Chodikov says, now you can't go into the Rebbe. The Rebbe is preparing for Hakofes, which was about 1 a.m., and that was it. But Rabbi Chodikov went into the Rebbe and related it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe gave over, they should find my father. Says, how are you going to find, the father asked, where are you going to find Dr. Seligson now? It was like a needle in a haystack. It was like thousands of people, and this is an emergency. Rabbi Chodikov says, don't worry, you'll find him. My father happened to walk in then, Ashgacha Pratis, from upstairs shul, which was quiet, empty. He immediately summoned him to the child. My father looked at the child, says, everything will be all right. And he saw what the condition is, and he asked to speak to the Rebbe. My father had an open door by the Rebbe, and when he came out from the Rebbe, he told the father of the child, from whom I heard this twice, that the Rebbe once told my father, when you get to a situation where medicine cannot do anything, you should pass a verdict that everything will be all right. And the Rebbe continues, and I will do the rest. A few minutes later, the child woke up. Child went down to Hakofes. The Rebbe waited till he was coming down Hakofes. Then the Rebbe came into Hakofes. This was a child, and is a child, the son of Rabbi Leibel Raskin from Morocco, and this child himself is today a shliach in Vermont.
Wow.
So this is an example.
Yeah. Okay, so you found most of these stories out after your father's passing, correct?
These stories I found out after. One of them is from someone who was behind the person who was online with the x-rays, going online to Yechidus. The second one is an article that the family own wrote up, the cardiologist. And the third one I heard from the father of this child.
And in what year did your father pass away?
The one that passed away, the one from Morocco.
No, your
and
father.
I heard that all after, years after.
What year did your father pass away?
In Tavshim Memtes 1989, January 89.
So after his passing, did the Rebbe ever address?
The Rebbe, after his passing, was in the house. This was a year after the Rebbetzin was niftar. The Rebbe was in the house the whole year. The Rebbe came to 770 for the Levaya and went back home. So now to understand what this means, the Rebbe, after 1978, after the heart attack, the Rebbe did not come out to every Levaya, every funeral. From 78 till 92, there were about maybe up to 20, I'm just giving a rough number, of Levayas which the Rebbe came out. Now, my father's Levaya was interestingly different than the others because the Rebbe was home. The Rebbe came to 770. He actually arrived right before us. He was in his car was right in front of our car. Coming to 770 after the Levaya, the Rebbe went to his room a minute and then went back home. I wrote to the Rebbe if I should publish things about my father, and the Rebbe said yes. You talk a lot with the family and to publish Dvar Torah. He wrote different things you're learning. I asked the Rebbe Benigia to the Matseva, and so the Rebbe already wrote, when he wrote in regards to writing about him for the Shloshim, some kind of an overview about my father. The Rebbe said, and to also make the point that he is a descendant up to the Alter Rebbe. So basically, the Rebbe wanted it should be mentioned, and in fact, also on the Matseva it is mentioned.
How do you describe it? How do you say matseva in English?
A
Tombstone?
tombstone. The tombstone, and that's basically what the older generations are mentioned. They're not so far. My father must have been, if we're not counting the Alter Rebbe, he was a fifth generation from the Alter Rebbe, like away from the Alter Rebbe. So it's a very, very close relationship, a very close descendant, and he comes from the Alter Rebbe's middle son, Rab Chaim Avraham.
How many children did the Alter Rebbe have?
The Alter Rebbe had 3 sons, and then he also had daughters. He had 3 sons were the Mittel Rebbe, Rab Chaim Avraham and Rab Mesha, and the daughters were, there was the Rebbetzin, there were the different daughters that are mentioned in the beginning of the Shalshelas HaYachas, which is basically the biography of the Rabbeim. And the Rebbetzin Freda was one of the the daughters of the Alter Rebbe, who actually passed away young, sadly. She would write letters of Chassidus to Chassidim, and she's buried right near the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe would say, discourses my modim for her exclusively.
Wow. How old was she when she passed away?
About 45. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So question. So I'm digging with my family history. So I want to ask you, it's not a secret that you're a relative of the Alter Rebbe, which spread light, and he had a spiritual grandfather, which was the Baal Shem Tov. So things get passed on down to generations, like different things from family and different traditions. So what are some traditions? What are some things that your father passed on? Because I'm sure his father passed on and his grandfather passed on, and he wasn't such a far relative of the Alter Rebbe. I would love to hear that from you.
Okay.
Also, I want to just also add before you answer, from what I understand, the Rebbe, our Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe, and I believe the previous Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, were also ancestors of the Alter Rebbe. So if you can just share with us some of the things that passed down some in your family.
Okay. In general, all the Rabbeim are descendants of the Alter Rebbe. Now, what was passed on in the family, very little. Basically, it was Yutas Kislev, I think the union of eating kasha. This is something that my grandfather had a seder in Krakow, and that tradition kept on. Otherwise, I don't recall that my father should point out other things. At least, even if he did it, he didn't mention where it comes from. But later, when I read up about my grandfather, I saw that the eating kasha buckwheat was a custom, and the previous Rebbe mentions it in Sichos that Chassidim do it till this very day.
And why was that a custom?
There isn't any clear thing about it. Why we don't see the Rebbe should elaborate on it. The previous Rebbe elaborates on it that it's a unique inyan. There's different speculations about it. I don't know. It's something which is not clear, really. None
Okay,
of the Rabbeim gave a reason for it.
and do you feel that the Rebbe and your father had an open door policy because he was a relative to the Rebbe?
It was basically because he was a doctor. My father would write in letters to the Rebbe with his letterhead and with the envelope, return address, and answers would come out immediately because they were life matters. The Rebbe would answer immediately. This is basically that we saw it. I mean, there were different. As soon as my father had a question, what direction to take when it came to a serious matter, the Rebbe would give the fullest attention, immediately respond.
Okay, another question. What, basically your father was a doctor, so usually doctors come from a history of doctors, so he had doctors in the family, correct?
He
Because
had his
you said his name
uncles.
was Avram.
His name was Avram because he basically was named after his grandfather, Rabbi Avram Abba, his father's father. And that's where he had the name. So basically, that's the name Rabbi Avram. They would call him briefly Rabbi Avram. Not too many people knew that he had a second name, Abba.
And what was his grandfather a doctor?
Not that we know. He was a very generous person, stockers and things, giving the city. And he's mentioned in different places and lists of different contributors. Uh, we don't know him as a doctor. It started from my father's uncles who were doctors from his mother's side. And that's basically where it all started.
Okay, and another question for you. Was your father ever frustrated that he didn't get the credit, I guess, that he deserved because he was so modest? People would come to him and then go to other people because they didn't feel that your father, I mean, when people don't charge enough, they don't feel like he was a professional. Did that ever bother your father?
No, not at all. Today, when a doctor is told that they're going to take that the patient wants a second opinion, they would just jump all over them. But my father, his modesty to the extent that he felt, okay, you want to go to someone else, go to someone else. It ends as many times, as I mentioned earlier, they came back to my father. My father was so modest that when as he was getting older and there were some doctors come in the community, he felt that he should not be practicing because he's taking away from them. So here you have a doctor from Europe, 55 years of experience, and he feels that he is in their way. I mean, there were many people who came to my father, mamish to the last years. They heard he was practicing. They came because they felt he is the most dear doctor to them.
I mean, I grew up hearing about Dr. Seligson because my father would go to him, and I'm sure his father went to him. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, it
pretty
goes way
amazing.
back.
Were people surprised when they found out that your father was one of the 36 hidden tzaddikim?
I don't know, but I know by the Shiva, when a person heard it, he said, "Oh, we picked up something like that. We figured so. You know, seeing him and his whole conduct, we figured that it must have been that." But generally, we didn't really hear any comments on what their feelings, impressions were. Some people want to understand what does it mean? Does it mean literally 36, or it means just a Shem Hamusha, like a borrowed name? But there's no way of knowing. But they never used that expression.
I just want to say that I'm so thankful and grateful that you shared so much about your father, things that most people don't know. Pretty amazing. I want to ask you a couple of questions to close up the evening. Uh, Two questions. Number one is how, like, what legacy did your father leave, and what did you learn from his life legacy, and how do you live with it today? And also, um, what would you say is a message for us to know about Chai Elul, like the birth of the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov, which was a huge light into this world. How do we continue that light into our lives?
Okay, in regards to his legacy, he was a very disciplined person. He was a person that every day he had a schedule, which I don't think too many people can keep up with it, because basically it was a very tight schedule, a heavy schedule, learning, davening, seeing patients, uh, ate very little, but ate healthy, uh, and demanded from himself and demanded from people around him, demanded from the family not to waste time, to accomplish every minute, every. And this is basically connected also with Chai Elul, as the Alter Rebbe says, that every day is a new life for a person, a new garment for the soul of the person. Every day it needs to be filled with contents. It's called Yema v'Yema Aved Avidites. The Zohar says every day it accomplishes its thing. Likewise, also in regards to Chabad, that my father was very much into understanding everything. He learned Chassidus. We would sometimes see abbreviation. He would make a point of it to understand what the abbreviation is in order to understand what it says there. He would delve into everything. And likewise, the union of the Baal Shem Tev was the union of Chayes the Lebedikite. He would come to Fabrengens. It wasn't easy. Shabbos Fabrengens, many, not everybody was able to make it, because after eating, some people fell away. But he would come. He would stand by Fabrengen. In later years, they realized as he's getting older, and they gave him a seat around behind the Rebbe. But originally, he would stand on the side and listen to the Fabrengen for hours. He encouraged me very much to chaza the Fabrengens. I would chaza the Fabrengens, review the Fabrengens for him. I would later write them, and actually, thanks to him, it is who Mamish encouraged me to write down the Fabrengens, and everything I hear should be recorded in writing. And this marked the beginning of my beginning to write my the Fabrengens as I heard them from the Rebbe.
Wow. So how many books did you actually write? Svarim.
I wrote 11 Svarim, 11. 30 is a little guzma. I wrote on the Ayem Yem, 3 volumes in the 80s, commentaries on the Ayem Yem, insights why the Rebbe, what the connection is between the quote and the shiur chitas and other things that we learned from that day. I wrote a biography about my father. This is all in Hebrew. I wrote a few mafteches, indexes on the Rebbe's rishimas, the Rebbe's manuscripts. Also a mafteach, which is 1,600 pages, an index on the Rebbe's talks of all the years. A big red sefer. So the second edition is almost out of print. I also wrote a compilation on Yutas Kislev from all the Rabbeim together, a compilation on all the Yom Tevim, the Chazachag B'Chag. Also wrote a compilation on the Seder of Shabbos by the Rabbeim from Thursday night through B'Tzoi Shabbos. And we have also various links online in regards to Hayom Yom, and we also have the podcast, which is Achrenes, story, things that we heard from the Rebbe, stories that we heard from the Rebbe, or stories about the Rebbe, which is going on already for about 7 years, and they're also accessible by various links.
And what language are these Svarim written
All
in?
of them are in English. There is actually a WhatsApp group which is in Hebrew, also parallel to Zechrenas, but generally all the podcasts on the internet are in English.
And all the books you transcribed is in English?
They're all in Hebrew, but the Hayom Yom is being now in online. It's translated also in English, and the elaborations are explained in English.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you if after the class you can send me all the links that I could send it out, because it's fascinating. You have so much knowledge. And I'm assuming that you have this gift because I mean, I don't have to be humble, but I could just share that you are a descendant of the Alter Rebbe. I heard somewhere that people are descendants of the Alter Rebbe has special gifts. Can you tell us about it? About the memory? I heard that somewhere someone said that. Is that something that you're aware of?
We heard in the past, I think it was written up by a Kopister Chassid or whatever. It was written up in a sefer, and I think it was also by also in our time one of the Gerer Rebbes may have said it. that the Einiklach of the Alter Rebbe are known to have a very good memory. This is basically as far as it goes, but it's that's what I heard.
Well, so the proof is in the pudding because you know so much. I know I did say 30 Sfarim, but now maybe we'll make that happen.
It's there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work. I'm also teaching, and everything is time.
Right. And would you say that your children followed in your footsteps and your grandfather's footsteps?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. My son works for Chabad.org. He's in charge of in touch with the media, with the same ruach, with the same inspiration, in Yonim, the teachings of the Rebbe. Likewise, my daughter. It's yeah, Baruch Hashem.
I'm not going to get into this because I shared this in the past, but my ancestry, Peretz Chain, was raised in the compound in the with the basically the Alter Rebbe raised him. His mom sent him, begged these merchants to take him because they knew if he would have stayed, he would have been in the army and then he would have been lost.
Mm-hmm.
So we go way back to the Alter Rebbe. So I'm sure that
Right.
my family line knew your family line, and somehow that's why maybe we connected. I'm very thankful to you for sharing about this, and I'm sure people are going to want to start learning Hasidus because we know it's for everyone. It's not just for Lubavitchers, it's for everyone. It enhances your life, like, it just makes it sweeter. So why wouldn't you want sweeter when you have an iced coffee and there's no sugar in there? It's very bitter, and Hasidus just sweetens everything for us. So I hope everyone will tap into learning Hasidus. I'm going to link your classes so people could tap into yours. And if anyone wants any Tanya classes, they can reach out. I felt like this was very appropriate to share for Chayelo because you're a descendant. And thank you for sharing about your Holy Father. And may we merit to be reunited with the coming of Mashiach. It was an honor and a
Amen.
privilege to have you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
And is there any message you want to share for the world today before we go?
Through spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus, we bring the redemption. That's the word, that the message that the Baal Shem Tov got, and the Rebbe once said that this is what he's here for, accomplishing the world, spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus, which today is accessible everywhere. Anybody could learn Chassidus, different languages, different ways, and it's open. A person just has to dip their fingers in the water or their feet in the water, and they're there.
Thank you.
Okay, Aksiva Vachsima Teva, Lishana Teva Sukkah, a good year and a sweet year for all.
And for you as well, and your
Thank you.
family. Yeah, I know that we end it, but we are going to just add one more thought that Rabbi Seligson would like to add for the world to hear about the Alter Rebbe's daughter, Rebbetzin Devorah Leah.
Okay, so we mentioned earlier in regards to Rebbetzin Freda, who was the oldest daughter, but the Alter Rebbe had two additional daughters. He had the daughter, the Rebbetzin Freda Leah, who later became the mother of the Tzemach Tzedek. And there was the Rebbetzin Rachel. So these were the three daughters of the Alter Rebbe, and as mentioned earlier, the three sons. So this was basically the Alter Rebbe's household, the members of the Alter Rebbe's children.
And what was Rebbetzin Devorah Leah known for?
The Rebbetzin Freda Leah supported very much the Tzemach Tzedek when he went to Petersburg. She would say Tillim for him, and Tzemach Tzedek said that Tillim helped him to be successful in Petersburg.
And didn't Rebbetzin Devorah Leah give her life for the
Rebbetzin Freda Leah gave her life for the Alter Rebbe because she saw there was a certain issue that was coming up on the life, hovering over the life of the Alter Rebbe. She said she's going instead, and with a 2-3-year-old child, she actually gave her life, and the Alter Rebbe raised his grandchild, the Tzemach Tzedek.
and he was the next Rebbe.
He was the third leader of
Rebbe.
Chabad. Right. First was the Alter Rebbe, the Michoel Rebbe, and then the Tzemach Tzedek. And Tzemach Tzedek was the one that brought together the two aspects of Torah, the two facets, the revealed part of Torah, the concealed part of Torah, and in his elaborations on Torah, he wrote hundreds of thousands of pages. We have a set of 40 volumes, Eira Torah, 45 volumes, and he brings together all the different aspects of Torah as one.
Wow, we have a lot to think about and a lot to learn. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing all this information. This was just a taste of what Chai Elul is all about, just a little small taste. Hopefully, you all will have a sweet new year filled with only good, and you should add Chassidus in your life because it really changes your life for the better. So hope you will delve into Chassidus because it's awesome. Try it. I did, and it's great.
Mhm.
Thank you, Rabbi
Okay.
Seligson.
Thank you. Okay, Hatzlacha Rabbi. Get back
Okay,
on, right?
so I had a little conversation when we stopped the recording with Rabbi Seligson, and I want to conclude with two more things, if that's okay with all of you. There's an additional quote that the Rebbe quoted about Dr. Seligson, um, the Rebbe's doctor and the doctor of many. So if Rabbi Seligson, if you could tell us, because I feel that you have what to share about this.
Okay. It was once at a Farbrengen that the Rebbe suggested that someone should visit my father about a certain issue, and they had doubts. So the Rebbe said, a person who has invested the Shulchan Aruch, is Nefesh Elikis with the Shulchan Aruch, invested the Shulchan Aruch with his Nefesh Elikis, which means the Jewish law with the Nefesh Elikis, with the godly soul, and invested the medicine with his Nefesh Hativis, with his natural soul. The Rebbe says, what do we need more? This was the word that the Rebbe told him. I heard this from someone who was at the Farbrengen. This probably must have been in the 1950s.
Wow, what a merit, what a zichus. And I want to also ask you, your father knew medicine like no other, which we see from all the stories. I'm sure he left things for us to know that was passed down, what to do in a medical situation. Do you feel like, and I'm sure you know some stuff because we spoke about it, do you feel like we can do a sequel of you telling us a little bit about what you know? From what I understand, you wrote some of these things down for a rabbi. If you could just tell us about it, and then we're going to do a sequel, part two. I feel that it would be a shame for you not to share this with the world because your father was a giant in the medical field.
In Mirz Hashem, yes, Mirz Hashem, on an occasion.
And okay, and can you just, you wrote it down. Do you have like a pamphlet or the right, your,
It is a booklet
okay,
which was a supplement to my father's biography. It came out in 1995, a few years after the book came out. I was asked by Rabbi Heller, who was one of the Rabbanim in Crown Heights, to note down, to mark down what I heard from my father, different advice pieces. And I compiled it all together, whatever came to mind. And this is where it is.
okay, so please God, we're gonna do a part two in the next little bit of time, which you agreed to, which I'm so honored because it's in Hebrew. Not everyone knows Hebrew, and we'll share it with the world. A gift from your father from above through you. Thank you, Rabbi Seligson. This time for real, honor, privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hatzlacha Rabbi.